Hello and welcome to another episode of Sustainability Natters. I am Esau.
I'm Beth.
And this is Robin.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Nice to have you here. And Robin, you are one of our suppliers for the Defence Estate. And it's very interesting to have you in because we hardly ever get the view from suppliers. We've had previous episodes in which we've spoken about it from the other point of view. So it's good to have you. First of all, begin by telling us, who you work for and what exactly you do for Defence and the training estate.
Sure. So I'm Robin Phillips and I work for Severn Trent Serivces. So we're one of 3 water and wastewater service providers across the UK estate. So within our package, we serve about 1,200 MOD sites of all different kinds and shapes. And what we do is we manage the distribution network on the MOD estate. So if you think of a large RAF station, at the boundary fence, there may be water supplied by the local water company, but internally there's a lot of water mains and networks which we have to manage on your behalf. And also things like boreholes on certain sites, which we manage the abstractions from, and then also what goes in has to come out. So all the dirty water, the wastewater, we manage that as well. And as I say, we cover quite a large patch all the way up to the Scottish border, right the way down to the English Channel.
Sounds like a massive undertaking. Give us a sense of the sort of a beehive of activity in terms of how you get all these various parts of the orchestra singing in harmony.
Sure. Probably the best way of answering that is if you're an end user on the mod estate and you have a problem, in other words, you don't have any water, or there's a problem with that water, or you have a blockage on the wastewater system. If it's external, that's something we deal with. So calls come into our business. We send our own people out to go and diagnose the problem, knock on the door of the end user and say, what is the issue? We diagnose it and then follow it up either straight away with our own field resources, or we bring in the specialists if it's a bigger job to put the problem right, whatever that might be.
And how long has this relationship been going on with the MOD?
So as Severn Trent Serivces, we've been working with MOD since 2005. So in March, it'll be our 20th anniversary, and I've been involved for that length of time as well on that and other projects. And I think that longer term relationship is quite good because we get to understand the mod and the end users and make sure that we can support you in your main role in life in terms of defending the nation. So it has been a long period of time and we've got 5 more years to run. But we're always, as an industry, looking to the future, and which is why sustainability really does matter to us as Severn Trent Serivces.
And in that sustainability, obviously a lot of us kind of feel as water or think of water as this endless resource. It's the water cycle. We're never going to run out of water. Is that the case, or can there be issues with?
There are issues today. And I think that's one of my main points really, is that when we talk about the impacts of climate change, 2050 and beyond, or the next generations, what they've got to cope with, it's not a problem for tomorrow, it's a problem today. So, for example, in some parts of the UK, particularly the South East and East Anglia, there are a finite amount of water resources. On those sites where the Ministry of Defence have their own boreholes because they're remote and maybe not connected to the public networks, we're already seeing a number of these are being restricted in terms of what we can abstract for you. So it's not a tomorrow problem, it's a today problem. So we've been very focused on sustainability as a business for the last 3 or 4 years to understand where we are today and, more importantly, what the impacts are likely to be on the defence estate tomorrow.
And what could those impacts be? Could it be something? Could it be as bad as we can no longer train, we can't do our jobs properly?
I think rather than no longer train, it will be a restriction on how much activity you can actually do at a location. So there have been 2 or 3 sites across the UK where there have been challenges. There's just not enough water in the ground, or just not enough water available from the public companies as well. What that means is operationally, there is a need to perhaps restrict how much activity is undertaken, or where the real opportunity is to actually use less per person in the first place. And I think it's a bit of a combination effect to make sure that the impacts of climate change are minimised on defence as a user and the rest of society. We all need to start looking forward and understanding what we can do today so that it's better tomorrow.
Now, in terms of looking forward, if you're looking at the sustainability angle, for example, if you do your job well, you don't get noticed, right? i.e. the faucet keeps running, water is still there.
Yep. Yeah.
How are you able then not to be a victim of your own success, in the sense that you deliver the deliverables, and as Beth was saying earlier on, it's a resource that's finite.
Yeah, I think what you've just said is a very good example of what we like to say. If we're doing our job well, you've never heard of us or you don't see us. And so we would sort of echo that very, very much. What we have been doing as Severn Trent Services over the last probably 18 months is engaging with key stakeholders in the particular parts of defence that we deal with. And rather than trying to sort of save the world, is focusing in on a couple of sites. So there are a couple of sites which we're working on in our package where we're sort of saying, look, and explaining to people in plain English, this is the problem today, it's going to be worse tomorrow. People's immediate answer is, well, what can I do? And we can all do a little bit. So the way it works in water, for example, is that we are responsible for the external networks. So external to a building, leakage is lower than a lot of the water companies across the UK on the mod estate. Internally is where the challenge is. And there's wastage and there's high usage for various reasons. Part of it is educational, but that's something that is perpetual and perennial. You've always got to do it because people are changing, particularly in the military. But there are things that can be done where a little bit of investment today can save a fortune tomorrow, not only financially, also in carbon, but in this case, in terms of water resources as well. So there is quite a lot that can be done, but not everywhere. Some sites are great. Other sites, there's a need or an opportunity for a bit of work to be done.
Now, coming in as a supplier also gives the opportunity to look at it from your lenses, as it were, your own sort of viewpoint. And I just wonder, in that relationship with the estate and defence more generally, are they the experts in coming in, or do they tell you what they want, or do you come in as the experts and say, well, this is what you need to do, and here are the reasons why you ought to?
So it's much more of the latter. So at the moment, the way in which we work is that we and the other two service providers have been brought in as industry experts. So if we're operating in water and wastewater as an industry, not every customer, not every end user is going to be expert in everything, whether it be electricity, gas, water, wastewater, whatever it might be. So what we do is we bring that expertise to bear and provide access to that from a defence point of view, but also because MOD is just one of our customers, we are working with and across the industry. So we hear about other innovations, other ideas, other initiatives, and we can bring that to the table from a defence point of view. So, for example, from a Severn Trent Services point of view, we invested very early on in highly accurate meters, water meters, so that we can detect or measure how much water is being used. But we can also detect things like leaks before they actually erupt from the ground. You can actually trace them. So if you invest that technology and that innovation up front, you can save a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of disruption. So worst case, for example, if you've got a water main passing under an important access road or a runway or something, we can spot that before it emerges. We can engage with site and say, right, there is a problem, we need to fix that in the next couple of weeks. When is best for you operationally? So it works really, really well. So yes, we bring a lot of that innovation to the table in terms of working with MOD.
That's amazing, because obviously as well, like obviously, like you say, it saves money by not having that, but also the disruption. Like say, if there's important operations going on, but if you can do it when operationally it's a better time, so that's really interesting.
And I just wonder, I mean, you talked about something that's almost futuristic, that you're able to detect leaks before they happen. Is this what, AI? I mean, what are we talking about here?
No, I think AI has a role to play, but I think everybody's familiar with the term AI, artificial intelligence, now. But we've been running these meters for nearly 20 years now. So it wasn't called AI then, it was just called technology, if you like. I think the important thing to say is that the way we tend to work it is there are alarms that ring, if you like, on our systems. But the good news is we still need a human to understand and interrogate. So, for example, if we notice a sudden increase in consumption, so water use, bear in mind that that could be, from an MOD point of view, that could be operational. So we will see a big jump on the graph, and rather than reacting to it, we will check in with site to say, right, we seem to have seen a big increase overnight. If you had higher troop movements coming to, more troops coming to site or not, if they haven't, right, we will then go out and investigate, narrow it down to where that problem might be and fix it before it becomes an issue and it prevents supply to the site. So it's very proactive, but not pure AI, if we can call it that. Not just yet, anyway.
Indeed. So talk to us then about some of the challenges that you face as a supplier.
I think there are a number of challenges, but I think one of the big ones is that, and it's not just MOD and sites, it is society at large. And I say to people, right, if when you go to bed, do you turn all the lights off at home? And the answer is normally, yes, we do. When you go to bed, do you go around and check all the taps are not dripping? Probably not, and I think there's this mentality thing. So one of the biggest challenges we've got is that we know from our data that I was just mentioning that there are sites with high consumption. We know that the external leakage is down, but we know that internal wastage may be high. One of the challenges, trying to sort of say, right, well, that is costing you X thousand pounds per year. If you spent twice that this year, you would reduce that forever. And trying to get the cash flow right is quite challenging. And I think the other thing as well is that the defence estate is quite complex. So there are a lot of stakeholders, there are a lot of suppliers. And what we need to do more and more going forward is actually work together. So we've got a great load of data. And what we're doing is a pilot project on a couple of sites where we're sort of saying, right, well, we are the water and wastewater service provider. There is the local site representative, if you like, whether it be RAF, Army, or the Navy representative. There is DIO, Defence Infrastructure, reps as well. And then there are other suppliers. And we've got to get all 4, 5 or 6, or however many it is, stakeholders to the table, working together and saying, yes, this is a problem. Yes, we all want to solve it. What do we do next? And at the moment, there's a lot of talk about sustainability, but getting action is quite a challenge. Again, that's not just MOD, not just UK, but globally.
And how receptive do you find people can be? And you do not need to name and shame anybody, but is it kind of you start talking about we need to save water, we need to do this, and people are like, yeah, 100% agree, or do you get any pushback?
We don't get pushback. I think that and what you're talking about in terms of explaining to people what sustainability is about is all part of the equation. I think inevitably and naturally, and again, we do it at home as well, we think about electricity, we think about gas. Water is probably even further down. Probably nowadays, our broadband speed is top of the list. So it's not pushback or barriers, it's just priorities. And I think that what we are seeing as an industry now, as the water industry, certainly in the UK, is that there are drier summers. They are with us now. So we have problems today. We're going to have problems in future years, and that's only going to get worse over the next 20, 25 years to 2050. The winters are wetter. Only last weekend, you'll have seen a lot of flooding on the news. That is happening more and more on the defence estate as well. Again, nobody's problem. It's just more of the stuff coming out of the sky. So we do need to start thinking differently. And the reason all of that is relevant is as soon as people experience either a lack of water or too much water, then they go, right, we need to do something about it. And it moves up that priority list.
Does that make your job in terms of comms much easier?
It does. I think the message is still the same. We can just replay it. And what we don't do is we say, right, well, we did tell you this 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whenever. It's right, okay, you're now understanding the point we're trying to make. But we never give up. I never give up. It's always a case of we're trying to explain to people the importance of why they need to think about water resources, why they need to think about flooding, particularly in the winter. But we're all like it. Until there's a problem, we don't really think it's going to happen to us.
And what you've just emphasized, Robin, is the sort of problem in terms of changing behavior. When you talked about, do we check the faucets at night? Guilty, I don't. And maybe it's something that one needs to start thinking about in terms of sustainability. Again, how do you propel that to the top of the agenda? I mean, minus, I know there's the flooding and all the things that we see in the news about sustainability, but how do you get that into people's heads and ears?
Well, I think it's a slow game, unfortunately. So certainly as a company, as far as Severn Trent Serivces is concerned, along with the rest of our group, we started sort of stating our aims and objectives in terms of sustainability back in 2019. So that will be coming up for just over 5 years ago now. What you have to do, and I've been doing it for the last 2.5 years with defence stakeholders, is to say, right, if you want to talk about, and when you're ready to talk about water and the environment and sustainability, we are here. This is what we're doing. So it's a slow burn. If people have a problem, it's being there to help and advise and guide and provide them with the information that they need. So if they need a business case, you've got to think about it in financial terms, not just in water resources terms. But again, as I say, as more and more people start to experience flooding or experience not being able to turn the tap on whenever they want, they will start to look at solutions. So one of the things that we've done, though, as an example, is we have actually designed and paid for and installed a rainwater harvesting system at one of our sites at Catterick Garrison. The main aim of that is to understand ourselves and learn from it, so that when people say, right, well, we've heard about rainwater harvesting, what does it look like? Well, rather than a theoretical exercise, we can take them up to Yorkshire and say, right, that's what it looks like. This is what it saves in water. This is what it saves in cash. This is what we've learned, because we have learned from it. We've made some mistakes, and that feeds into the next one. So again, for me, it's once people want to start talking about what the problem and they want to know what the solution is, if we've got an example or a model or a pilot we can take them to, it starts to gel and they can build their own picture about what they need to do.
And you did talk about challenges. You've also mentioned one solution. Do you have others you can talk about in terms of what your company is doing, again, looking to coin a phrase, ahead of the curve, as it were?
Yeah, so one term that we use is the opportunity to use nature-based solutions. So rainwater, when there's too much rain, the tendency is for it to be piped away, build bigger pipes, take it away to the river, and then we know what the consequences are of that on the downstream catchments, the areas that receive the water. So one of the things that we are doing within Severn Trent Serivces, and Severn Trent is doing as a wider group across the Midlands, is investing in nature-based solutions where we can basically, for example, build a wetland or a reed bed to capture that water. So it attenuates it, as we call it. It delays its discharge to the environment, and in fact, it'll actually absorb a good amount of it within the reeds or the wetland that is being built. So it's an artificial wetland. The beauty of that is that you are capturing the water, so you're preventing flooding downstream. You're actually building building something which has and improves biodiversity, and quite often we find that they're very good for amenity as well. So people like to walk around these artificial wetlands. What I've been trying to do for the last couple of years, I haven't quite succeeded yet, but we're nearly there, is to find a location on an MOD site where we can actually build one of these to, again, demonstrate that nature can actually help us to offset some of the problems that we've built ourselves in terms of infrastructure on the defence estate. So that would be another example.
Yeah, I was wanting to go further on that and ask how you see nature as your ally in providing a solution for human problems.
I think there's various ways of approaching that, but I think, again, it takes a little bit more time and a little bit more thought. And nowadays, everybody wants everything yesterday. We all do. We want everything delivered yesterday. Projects need to be delivered tomorrow at the latest. So what we've been doing with our engineering teams within Severn Trent Serivces, for example, is saying to them, right, you are designing, you're engineering a solution to a problem. You're looking at technical solutions. Great. We've always looked at cost, cash, but now we want you to look at carbon as well. So what that actually does is it helps our engineering teams and everybody else just stop and think about what the impact is of what they're building. So the tendency traditionally is to, dig holes and pour concrete and fill them back in again. Whereas what we can do is we can harness nature as a lower cost solution in terms of cash. It's a lower carbon solution in terms of, mitigating and minimizing the impacts of climate change. But it just means that we've got to let people stop and think. And it may need a little bit more land, but then again, if you can improve biodiversity and also increase amenity for the site concerned, then those are all pluses. And I think we've got to give a bit more credit, if you like, for those things rather than just looking at what is the cheapest solution.
So creating that, is that something that you're obviously hoping to do if
Yes,
we can find an appropriate place?
Absolutely.
That's really
absolutely.
interesting.
I think we've looked at 5 or 6 different locations, and RAF Leeming is a great great place because they've got quite a challenging net zero goal in terms of they are spending a lot of time and effort on looking at how Leeming can become carbon neutral. And I think that sort of mindset is probably 80% of the problem solved because you've got willing people. So we've looked at a couple of locations at Leeming, for example, and just because the gradient and the flow wasn't right, we couldn't actually build what we wanted. But again, if you've got sites that have a bit of land and a problem to solve, there's too much standing water or too much water when it rains, then that's an ideal opportunity to sort of say, right, well, would these nature-based solutions work in this location? We can quickly check it out, literally with a half-hour visit, and say yes or no, and we can then either take it forward and say, do you know what, on balance, this isn't quite going to work in that location. So we've got used to what to look for. And again, it's just finding that first one that we can build and then showcase.
And that's then obviously beneficial to the estate because it's going to stop flooding on the estate, hopefully, but also just the local communities, just ordinary people in their homes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's a fabulous initiative. So obviously you say about trying to decrease water wastage. You've mentioned about turning the taps off. Are there other things that we can do? Because I like to think of myself as that I don't waste too much water, but are there things that we can all be doing?
I think, well, the short answer is yes. I think that there's almost like a checklist, if you like, you can give people. So yes, it's turning off the taps, but I think when we see some of the data come back on flow measurement, we can see some of the larger, if you like, more technical buildings. You know, there have been buildings, for example, which through nobody's fault, it just happens. There's a tank which is filling up with water and then it's going straight down the overflow. So again, it's just using the data, but having an honest look around each establishment and each location and say, right, where are we potentially wasting water? What could we do? So one of the things that is easily done at home, so this is a tip for home, not just at work, wherever you work, is aerated taps. So you may have heard of these things, but you can always tell if you've got one. So a modern tap would normally have an aerator. So if you look underneath it, it looks like a little sort of flower sieve or a tea strainer. And what that does is introduce a little bit of air into the water, and you use less. So if you don't put the tap on full whack, you don't need to, because you're getting a lot more water. It's a lot easier and better to wash your hands. So those sorts of things, it's things like toilet. So again, what goes in, water has to come out, wastewater. In your toilet, it's in a modern installation or a modern building, modern home, you'll have water efficient cisterns. Whereas you can use saver flush bags, you can, if you've got an older cistern or you don't want to get rid of it, you can install these simple devices which mean you use less water. A bit more sophisticated than a brick in the cistern, but that sort of thing. So it's just trying to get people thinking and implementing these ideas. And what I've got to say is that the best people that we have found to engage with are probably kids under the age of 12 or 13. Because they listen, they understand it, and they take it home, and they will nag you as parents to death until you've actually done it yourself. So we found that educating kids, and we do quite a lot of family days on the estate, particularly during the summer months, we show them where water comes from, where it goes to. You know, we have some of our equipment on site and explain to them what happens when one of their poos gets stuck in the pipe. And they are really, really engaged, but they then take that back. The slightly older kids, so I include myself in that, anybody over sort of 12, 13, a lot more people are interested in what happens to the planet in the future. Yeah. So we're finding that the conversations that are happening are a lot more with kids of all ages.
I'm also curious from a supplier point of view, the sort of conversations you have within your own ecosphere. And I'm thinking primarily about funding. I mean, sustainability is not a cheap exercise.
Funding is probably our big barrier at the moment. But again, what we've done over the last couple of years is we've put together quite a simple toolkit where we say, right, you have a problem. And again, it's not just defence, it's any customer or any end user. If you have a problem, what is that costing you? And probably the true cost is not being recognised today. So as water resources become scarcer, that will mean, I'm afraid, that it becomes more costly. And that tipping point in terms of a financial business case will be reached a lot sooner. So if you take flooding, for example, right, well, yeah, we just open the doors and out it goes, it's fine. But we've seen examples on the housing estate, the married quarters estate, where we've suggested that, for example, taps are turned off in the winter, empty properties, because they freeze. They aren't turned off. There's a lot of damage caused. So there's a lot of things that can be done, but having that sort of simple business case is absolutely key, because it is something that's going to become more costly, in this case on the defence estate, And there will be value in spending a bit of money this year to avoid future problems, next year and beyond. So it is changing.
And do you link up with other suppliers as well within the industry to sort of share best practices and, kind of thrash out the latest technologies or discoveries?
Yeah, it certainly as an industry, and it's a pretty open industry, to be honest. If somebody has a great idea, you will find that sort of shared around. We do tend to be very conservative with a small c, very conservative, very cautious, because we're dealing with water quality. So what we don't want to do is to obviously put water quality at risk. So we will tend to, if we heard about a good idea, we will go, right, well, let's learn about that, and we will trial it ourselves just to make sure that we're comfortable, so our brand and reputation isn't at risk as well, and more importantly, our customers' health isn't at risk. So yes, innovation is pretty broadly spread, and it's always changing. It's always changing, and so we're ear to the ground for that sort of thing.
And coming back to the estate, what are some of your concerns more broadly?
I think there are a number of things. So, for example, inevitably, there is a lot of development on the MOD estate, on the defence estate. Quite often, the construction standards of what we're seeing going in terms of water and wastewater leaves something to be desired. Now, what that means is, for example, that if something is difficult to operate and maintain in the future, it's going to be more costly to do. So there is a tendency to build it cheap and hope it doesn't go wrong. Whereas actually what we try and do is advise everybody to, make sure you're spending the right amount of money up front so that you don't have downstream problems and things like capacity. Think about capacity in the future. There is also a need to get a lot more joined up in terms of our thinking. So it may be that if not today, then tomorrow water resources are critical in a certain county or part of the UK. When as defence you're planning or considering where to build an expansion or a new establishment, it may be that actually location A is ideal for everything else except water, but location B will actually have enough to be able to accommodate you, or one or the other may have a flooding risk. Because again, this is something that is going to become more of an issue going forward. So early engagement with, water and wastewater service providers and getting water into the equation quite early on is key, because it will become more and more of an issue as we go forward. And also building for the future, not in a great way, not in a Rolls-Royce standard, but just to the right sort of standard to make sure it's efficient going forwards.
And I'm just guessing, I could be entirely wrong, but probably most of these estates have got archaic piping systems from way back in the day, and technology has obviously moved forward. Are you having to find yourself going in there, well, not you personally, but your organizations, your companies, going in there literally digging out the pipes and replacing them with brand new ones, things of that sort? Is it that basic, the problem?
Yes and no. is the answer really. So what we tend to do is we will we get called out to fix a problem, or we detect there's a leak and we will fix it. What we tend to do is we will capture that data so that in a 12-month period, for example, we will know that we've been to RAF wherever, or a barracks at another location. If we're getting more than one or two a year repairs, and if on some sites you may find that may be 10 or 12 repairs a year, then that's the tipping point for us. Right, hang on, we are going out and fixing leaks on that same length of water main repeatedly. It's at a point now where it's more cost effective to actually rip it out and start again. So on the whole, the answer is that no, it's not too bad, because we've got the technology, we can see when bursts are coming. But in a few locations, yes, we do have to, and we have in the past, taken out mains and replaced them, quite often because they are redundant, so there are different pipes and different materials which are resilient or not resilient. So it just becomes, from an operational point of view, defence-wise and a water point of view, that it's worth us, actually replacing that asset to a new standard. But generally, they're not too bad at all.
And while obviously there are issues and concerns and things, but what about the positives? Like, what makes you optimistic for the future?
I think the answer to that, which is a very good question, is that we are really started to get some traction and engagement. I think that actions do speak louder than words for me. So it's all very well and good talking about responding to the changes caused by climate change, but we've actually got to step in. So we are seeing greater engagement. Things like, these podcasts are good because it encourages the conversation. I think that we've got a lot of data, so we don't need more data.
Okay.
We're having a lot of conversation. What we now need to do is convert that into action and get people to understand that if we don't do things differently on the defence estate going forward, we are going to have a problem. And those problems are not being dreamt up by the industry or anybody else. There are some sites where water resources are at full stretch already. So we know it's a problem, but getting that engagement, getting that discussion the time is right. So it is all very encouraging.
Well, there you hear it. So we talk about traction and engagement, according to Robin, and action speaking louder than words. I like that. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to be with us. Really appreciate your presence. And Beth, any parting words?
No, it's thank you, and I will be checking my taps tonight before I go to bed. So
That's
thank you.
progress.
Yes,
if everybody
exactly.
did that's really
You've got
good.
two people on your side, Robin. There you go.
Just needed a few more now. don't we?
Exactly. So, on that note, we'll see you next time. Same place.